The last time most people saw her, she was a cautionary tale. A country music prodigy who burned so bright she nearly disappeared in her own flames. But that was 30 years ago. Today, Tanya Tucker lives in a place few celebrities ever find, a remote slice of paradise where the only audience that matters isn't watching at all. What she's built there will make you question everything you thought you knew about fame. And her story? It's far from over. In fact, the most shocking chapter is just beginning. Before we uncover what really happened, tell us in the comments, what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding about this story? She walked into that Nashville studio like she owned it. A 13-year-old girl with a voice that had no business coming out of someone so young, facing down a room full of veteran musicians who'd seen it all. Tanya Tucker didn't flinch. She looked at Billy Sherrill, the legendary producer who'd shaped the careers of George Jones and Tammy Wynette, and said, "Well, I know my part, boys. Do you know yours?" That moment in March 1972 would change everything. The song was Delta Dawn, a haunting ballad about a 41-year-old woman wandering the streets of Brownsville, searching for a mysterious dark-haired man who never came. Mature subject matter for any artist. Practically unthinkable for a child. But Tanya wasn't like other children. She never had been. Born in Seminole, Texas, into a family that moved constantly, her father Bo worked as a heavy equipment operator chasing day labor jobs from Arizona to Utah to Nevada. The Tuckers lived in ramshackle apartments and trailers, barely scraping by. But in that cramped, uncertain existence, a voice emerged. At age 6, Tanya belted out a song so powerfully that her family sat stunned. They discovered something extraordinary in their youngest child. Her father, Bo Tucker, was a complex figure, part dreamer, part bulldog, completely devoted to his daughter's talent. He drove her hundreds of miles to fairs and concerts, approaching touring stars like Ernest Tubb and Mel Tillis, negotiating opening slots for his little girl. He traded a jack for a tank of gas just to get to meetings. And when a potential manager offered $50,000, the equivalent of nearly $500,000 today, but demanded Bo step aside, the construction worker tore the check to pieces and walked out. "This guy took my dad and my mother in the office," Tanya later recalled. "He said, 'Listen, I'm gonna write you a check right now. I want to manage your daughter, but I don't want no daddy involved.'" Bo's refusal cost them everything, and it gained them everything that mattered. The same manager wanted to change her name to Tammy Tucker. Bo said hell no. His daughter was Tanya, and that's how it would stay. By 1969, the family moved to Henderson, Nevada, near Las Vegas, hoping to tap into the entertainment industry. Tanya was already performing regularly, already dreaming bigger. She quit a steady gig on the Liu King Ranger show, a Phoenix children's program, because she yearned for more grown-up material. She formed a singing group with her sister and neighborhood children. She sweet-talked her way onto stages with Grand Ole Opry stars. Then came the demo tape. It circulated around Nashville with little success, until it reached Dolores Fuller, an actress and songwriter who had written hits for Elvis Presley. She recognized something special and sent it to Billy Sherrill. The producer was intrigued. When he finally brought Tanya into the studio, she proved she was no novelty act. She could hold her own with the best. Delta Dawn was released in April 1972 and shot to number 6 on the country charts. A 13-year-old girl had just announced herself to the world with the authority of someone twice her age. Within a year, she had 3 number-1 hits: "What's Your Mama's Name?", "Blood Red and Going Down", and the controversial "Would You Lay With Me in a Field of Stone?". Songs that tackled adultery, abandonment, and desire, topics that would have made most adults uncomfortable. Tanya delivered them with a husky, weathered voice that felt lived-in and authentic. In 1974, she became the youngest country artist ever to grace the cover of Rolling Stone. The headline read, "Hi, I'm Tanya Tucker. I'm 15. You're gonna hear from me." A declaration, a promise, a warning. On her 16th birthday, she signed a $1.4 million contract with MCA Records. She had more money than most adults would see in a lifetime. She had fame beyond what most performers ever achieve. She had the world at her feet, but she was still a child, and children, no matter how talented, aren't meant to carry the weight of a full adult life. They aren't meant to navigate a world where men in suits see dollar signs instead of a minor. They aren't meant to be the breadwinner for an entire family while still learning who they are. Tanya Tucker had everything by age 13. But what she didn't have, what no 13-year-old could have, was the armor to survive what came next. And it was already coming for her. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe so you never miss our next documentary. By the time Tanya Tucker turned 16, she had already lived a dozen lifetimes. She had #1 records, millions of dollars, and a face on the cover of Rolling Stone. But she also had something else, a reputation that had grown far beyond her music. And the country music industry, a world built on family values and God-fearing imagery, didn't quite know what to do with a teenage girl who sang about adult desires. The controversy was never really about the songs. It was about her age. When Tanya released Would You Lay With Me in a Field of Stone in 1973, the lyrics were practically tame by any reasonable standard, a poetic meditation on love and commitment written by David Allan Coe for his brother's wedding vows. Yet the title alone sent shockwaves through conservative Nashville. She was just 15. Radio stations banned the song. Venues refused to book her. One Fort Worth promoter, Billy Minnick, stood his ground and simply told her she couldn't perform it at his family establishment. Tucker agreed, because she understood even then that the controversy had nothing to do with the words themselves and everything to do with the uncomfortable reality of a young girl singing them. But she wouldn't apologize. That wasn't Tanya Tucker. What followed was a relentless gaze from the media. The same industry that had embraced her as a child prodigy now presented her as something darker. Headlines whispered about country's Lolita. Men in suits, decades older than her, had profited from packaging a teenage girl's voice and image, and then they turned around and judged her for it. It was a hypocrisy so blatant that it would have broken a less determined artist. It nearly broke Tanya instead. She began drinking in her late teens, not out of rebellion, but out of loneliness. The explanation she later gave was startling in its simplicity. You send your ass out on the road doing 2 gigs a night and after all that adoration go back to empty hotel rooms. Loneliness got me into it. That loneliness, combined with the pressure to constantly prove herself, became a dangerous cocktail. By 1978, she had moved to Los Angeles and convinced herself that she could cross over to pop stardom. She recorded the rock-influenced album TNT, posed for a sexy cover, and tried to reinvent herself as something new. The album went gold, but the image shift earned her more scrutiny. Los Angeles nightlife welcomed her with open arms, and she fell into it completely. She later admitted, "I was the wildest thing out there. I could stay up longer, drink more, and kick the biggest ass in town. I was on the ragged edge." What few people understood at the time was that Tanya Tucker had been running since she was 6 years old. She had performed on television shows, in rodeos, and on radio broadcasts. She had grown up on stage, around adults who treated her like one of them. By the time she actually became an adult, she was exhausted and nobody had taught her how to stop. Then came the relationship that would define her tabloid years. Glenn Campbell was 22 years her senior, a country-pop legend already several times divorced, battling his own demons with drugs and alcohol. They met when Tucker was just a teenager, reunited a few years later, and ignited a whirlwind romance that burned hotter and more destructively than anything Nashville had seen. They fought, they brawled, they took drugs together, and they broke up, only to get back together again. Campbell threw her a $57,000 birthday party in Los Angeles. Tucker got him in trouble with the law. They were tabloid gold, the Blake and Miranda of their era, only more famous and more volatile. He was the love of my life, Tucker would confess decades later. But at the time, she was too young and too stubborn to know it. I knew how to push the buttons. I thought there was more fish in the sea. For a brief moment in 1981, they were engaged. Then it fell apart. Tucker broke it off, and Campbell quickly moved on. And Tucker has spent the rest of her life wondering what might have been if she had tried one more time. In the aftermath, she hit rock bottom. Her career tanked. Her singles stopped charting. She was still only in her mid-20s, but the industry had already written her off as a cautionary tale. The girl who had everything was quickly losing it all. She packed up and moved back to Nashville, retreating from California's temptations. But the damage was done. Her addiction had deepened, and her family watched helplessly as she spiraled. "I knew if I didn't get help, I would lose everything," she later admitted. Her father and mother, the same people who had sacrificed so much to launch her career, staged an intervention. In 1988, Tanya Tucker checked herself into the Betty Ford Center. She was 29 years old and had spent half her life in the public eye. She was also one of the few child stars in country music to survive her 20s at all. But surviving isn't the same as healing. And Tanya was only just beginning to understand the difference. If this story surprised you, share it with someone who would enjoy uncovering forgotten Hollywood stories. The Betty Ford Center was a strange place for a girl who'd grown up on stages under bright lights. No applause, no cameras, just silence and the hard work of facing herself. But what Tanya Tucker didn't know as she walked through those doors in 1988 was that her career wasn't over. It was about to be reborn in a way no one could have predicted. The comeback that followed is one of country music's most remarkable second acts. By 1990, Tanya had signed with Capitol Records and released Tennessee Woman, an album that proved she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. The album produced 3 top 10 singles, including Walking Shoes and her duet with T. Graham Brown, Don't Go Out. It charted at number 18 on the country albums list and earned gold certification. But the real milestone came in 1991 when she released What Do I Do With Me? The album became her first to go platinum, a landmark achievement that cemented her staying power. That same year, the Country Music Association voted her Female Vocalist of the Year. She couldn't attend the ceremony. She'd just given birth to her second child, Bo Grayson, and was at Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville when her name was called. Her father, Bo Tucker, was watching the show at home when Clint Black, the announcer, spilled a secret Tanya hadn't told anyone. She'd named her son after her father. My dad just about fell off of the couch, she recalled. It was a rare moment of pure joy in a life that had given her so little of it. For the next several years, Tanya did what she'd always done. She kept working. She released albums, toured relentlessly, and defied the industry's expectations. Between 1988 and 1997, she racked up 4 gold or platinum albums. She was one of Capitol Records' biggest female artists. But something was shifting beneath the surface. The music was still there. The voice was still there. But the person behind it had changed. She was no longer the teenage prodigy fighting for survival. She was a mother. She had 3 children now: Presley, born in 1989 to actor Ben Reed; Bo Grayson, born in 1991; and Layla, born in 1999 to songwriter Jerry Leister. Her children became her anchor. When asked about motherhood, she didn't hesitate. The best things I ever did. My 3 young engines, Presley Taniter, Bo Grayson, and Layla La Costa. So grateful and proud to be their mama. But the industry that had once embraced her as a teenager was growing cold again. By the late 1990s, her singles were no longer hitting the top 10. She was 40 years old, and the country music machine had moved on to younger voices. Tanya had been in the spotlight for nearly 3 decades, and she was exhausted. In 2002, she founded her own label, Tucker Time Records, to regain control of her music. But the independence didn't translate to widespread success. She released Tanya in 2002, then stepped back. Her father, the man who had sacrificed everything for her career, passed away in 2006. Her mother, Alma Juanita, followed in 2012. The 2 people who had been with her from the very beginning were gone. For the first time since she was 13, Tanya Tucker had no one to fight for her, and she wasn't sure she had the fight left in herself. She moved to Malibu in 2007, leaving Nashville behind. The same town that had made her a star now felt like a ghost town. She retreated, not from the public eye entirely, but from the relentless pressure of being Tanya Tucker. She turned inward. She raised her children. She thought about the life she'd lived and the person she'd become. And for a long while, it seemed like that was where her story would end, a veteran on the sidelines, watching the next generation take her place. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe so you never miss our next documentary. For years, the industry had written her off. A relic of another era. A cautionary tale who'd somehow survived but would never truly return. Then came 2019, and everything changed. Tanya Tucker released While I'm Living, produced by Brandi Carlile and Shooter Jennings. The album was raw, honest, and stripped of all pretense. It wasn't a comeback, it was a revelation. The critics didn't just praise it, they championed it. The album earned her 2 Grammy Awards in 2020, her first Grammys ever, after 10 previous nominations. She won Best Country Song for Bring My Flowers Now and Best Country Album for While I'm Living. 48 years after Delta Dawn, Tanya Tucker finally held a Grammy in her hands. But what came next surprised everyone who thought they knew her story. Tanya didn't use her resurgence to chase radio hits or sign massive tours. She used it to build something entirely different. She left Malibu behind. She left Nashville behind, too. She found a different kind of home on a Texas ranch, a place where the pace of life matched the rhythm she'd been seeking her entire career. A place where she could finally breathe. Today, Tanya Tucker lives on a sprawling ranch in Burnett County, Texas. It's about an hour northwest of Austin, far from the bright lights and recording studios that defined her early life. But it's not the isolation you might expect. This ranch is alive, teeming with animals, family, and a kind of chaos that Tanya now embraces rather than flees. She has chickens that she treats like children, giving them names like Loretta Hen and Tanya Clucker, bathing them in the kitchen sink. She takes in stray dogs. She puppet-sits for friends and family. And then there are her horses, which she would likely let inside the house if she could get away with it. Her boyfriend, Craig Dillingham, a childhood acquaintance she reconnected with in 2019, has learned to share her affection with the entire menagerie. According to those close to the couple, the animals are definitely getting to Craig. The fur is always flying, and it's all a bit much for him to handle. But that's the thing about Tanya Tucker now. She's done compromising. She's built a life that works for her. This ranch is more than just a home. It's a declaration. For a woman who spent decades performing for others, she's finally created something that isn't for anyone else. But even as she found peace, the outside world wasn't finished with her. And in 2026, Tanya Tucker would step back into the spotlight in a way no one could have predicted. Not to perform, not to promote, but to fight for the very land she'd built her new life on. If this story surprised you, share it with someone who would enjoy uncovering forgotten Hollywood stories. That ranch in Burnett County wasn't just a home. It was her sanctuary, the place where she'd finally found peace after decades of chaos. But in 2026, that peace was threatened in a way she never expected. The state of Texas had approved a massive $15 billion transmission project, 200 miles of 765 kilovolt power lines designed to carry electricity from the Dallas area to the power-starved Permian Basin. It was a project of staggering scale, intended to supercharge West Texas's oil and gas industry. And one of the proposed routes ran straight through Tanya Tucker's land. That little ranch is our little piece of Texas heaven, with our horses and our animals, and the prettiest sunsets I've ever seen, Tucker later told lawmakers. I even shot my last album cover there. I was so proud. But the project wasn't just about scenery. It was about legacy. Her partner, Craig Dillingham, had family roots on that land stretching back 140 years. His father was born on the ranch in 1921. For generations, the Dillingham family had lived, worked, and died on that soil. Now, a state bureaucracy was prepared to carve it up with towering transmission lines. Tucker didn't just sit back and accept it. She fought back. In July 2026, she traveled from Nashville, where she was filming a movie, to Austin to testify before the Texas Senate Committee on Business and Commerce. She stood before lawmakers and spoke not as a celebrity, but as a Texan, a landowner, a protector of something that could never be replaced. I'm sad, she told committee members, but I'm mad. And I'm very disappointed on how this has been handled. This isn't the way we do things in Texas. You don't rush in and turn someone's life upside down. And then she did something no one expected. She didn't just testify, she performed. Tucker closed her testimony with a rendition of her hit Texas, When I Die. A reminder of where she came from, a warning that some things are worth fighting for. Her testimony helped expose serious flaws in the approval process. Landowners across the state reported receiving confusing or late notices, with too little time to challenge routes that could permanently devastate their properties. The committee chairman called the process broken. The lieutenant governor joined calls for reform. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, the little girl who'd conquered Nashville was standing her ground for something that mattered far more than fame. And that fight was just the opening chapter of her most unexpected act yet. If you enjoyed this documentary, Like the video and subscribe for more true celebrity stories every week. 2 days after Tanya Tucker stood before the Texas Senate and sang Texas, When I Die, something remarkable happened. Senate Business and Commerce Chairman Charles Schwertner called on state regulators to reject the pending transmission applications until lawmakers overhaul the approval process. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick joined the push, declaring that the current process being utilized by the PUC for proposing and approving transmission lines is broken and must be reformed. The woman who'd once been dismissed as a washed-up cautionary tale had just helped derail a $15 billion project. And she'd done it not with a Grammy or a platinum record, but with something far more powerful, the truth. "I'm sad," she told the committee. "But I'm mad. And I'm very disappointed on how this has been handled. This isn't the way we do things in Texas. You don't rush in and turn someone's life upside down." She'd come to Austin fresh from filming a movie in Nashville, calling it the best part of her day. But she wasn't just fighting for herself. "I want to be the voice for all the people who can't be here today, whose lives will be severely affected by these transmission lines," she said. "Some weren't even notified, some can't afford to hire attorneys to represent them, and I want to speak for those people too." She spoke of her partner Craig Dillingham, whose family had owned the land for 140 years. His father was born on that ranch in 1921. "How do you put a price on that?" she asked. And she reminded lawmakers that she wasn't against progress. She remembered the 2021 ice storms, melting snow for water just to survive. She wanted a stronger power grid, but she wanted a fair process too. The project's opponents, landowners who'd felt powerless against Goliath, felt a shift. One organizer described the response as dancing for joy. But perhaps the most telling moment came when Tanya concluded her testimony. She promised she wasn't there to sing. "I'm here to talk to you heart to heart, Texan to Texan." Yet she couldn't resist. She sang from her soul, a reminder that she was, and always would be, Tanya Tucker. If you enjoyed this documentary, like the video and subscribe for more true celebrity stories every week.